I received a listener question recently that was asking why it was that they were having these amazing experiences of high vibration, and then they would sink back down to almost, they didn't describe it this way, but almost this everyday self. And I really like this question because it reflects what I have observed in my own journey, which is I've called it being on the mountain because that's what it feels like. You have this breakthrough in consciousness and awareness. And this can be through meditation, through a spiritual awakening, through psychedelics, through a near death or actual death experience. There are many ways that this can happen, but all of a sudden you are ripped out of your idea of the world, your idea of the afterlife, and you can have radical changes as a result. But what happens is that when you break through that awareness, it's not permanent. Some people call it going back to sleep, but I don't actually agree with this, because what I find happens, and this is what I answered to this person with, what I find that happens is that you have different modalities of awareness and consciousness embedded in you. You are, of course, one person, one personality, but you're actually bigger than just your school persona, your work persona, your mom or your dad persona, or your lover persona. You see, you have all of these roles and identities. And binary societies in particular tend to favor fragmentation and compartmentalization. I don't know if we'll have time to go into that, but I find that this is really an interesting pressure point, that those who are gifted, highly exceptionally talented people, regardless of whether or not they were ever identified in school, and or neurodivergence, the bigger they are, the harder it is for them to fit in neatly into one particular box or arrangement. And there's a lot of pathology that can happen as a result, because we learn how to model a certain aspect of our personality to gain acceptance and creature comforts or jobs, right? It's like when you go and you apply for a job, you select certain experience points. And when you show up to an interview, you are a curated version of your best self that you think is going to win the position if you're skilled at interviewing. Most people do this, right? You curate an image of yourself and you carry that almost like this mask. And this is well accepted in our society. And where we run into problems is when we require people to dilute down their personality or to dilute down their self in order to fit in. It can cause a lot of pain for a lot of people. This is what neurodivergents call masking. And it creates a lot of suffering inside because you end up having this false persona as a way to gain love and acceptance. And we do this instinctually and naturally. So this is controlling a perception that is well documented. Many people understand this. And where we veer into the shadow is when we do so unconsciously. But before we get there, I want to revisit this idea that you are more than just that singular image that you're carrying around. Most people are. And if you're just one-dimensional, then you're definitely not listening to this. And so as a result, you have many compartments inside of you. And some of those compartments I call are under the hood, which is why when you start drinking or exploring the party scene or substances or even psychedelics, you can be surprised, and you can surprise other people by what comes out, because you could have other personality fragments inside of you. And it's like all of a sudden the wallflower introvert turns into the life of the party, and everybody's like, whoa, where have you been? And you're like, oh, you just get a couple drinks in me and I'm a karaoke hound, whatever it is, right? You hear those stories if you don't yourself embody one of those. And that's because the curated personality, the one that leads the show, is not the full picture. Some people have demons inside of them, and so you get a couple drinks in them and it's like they're tearing the house apart and throwing the dinner plates at you and telling you all of the horrible things that you've done to them. And so, it can take many different flavors and many different forms, and it's not all fun. And so when we have things under the hood, when we have things buried in our subconscious, this means that they can come out and join the party. And when you start to break through to supra-consciousness, out of your everyday experience, you then have another element of your personality. Instead of being under the hood, this is kind of like over the hood, over the hood of the car. And if you're the driver, and all of a sudden, you now have this other part of you that you're remembering that is coming online, but you can't stay in that point of awareness unless you go and become a monk or a nun and you take yourself out of your everyday experience, and then you can, right? And lots of people take that path, and then you have a very pure position of being above the hood, and you give up everything. You give up dating, you give up your triggers, your wounds, like they stay under the hood. I mean, how many monks do personal work for relationship issues, intimacy issues, if they're celibate, right? And so presumably they have none, or another way to look at it is that they still have things under the hood, but the lifestyle that they lead is one of the awareness of being above the hood. And so as a result, they never have to fix anything under the hood, but it's still there. And if they were to leave that lifestyle and go and reintegrate into an everyday, ordinary existence, then I'm sure they would be rather surprised at what would have to be worked through. I knew a story actually of a monk that got cast out of their church, or their temple, excuse me if I don't have the right vernacular. They got cast out because they were living an everyday existence. Maybe they weren't a full monk. I don't fully understand their position. But they were a leader in a Buddhist temple, and they started having an affair with a student while they were also married. And so even though they were representing a philosophical position of a teacher, somebody that was highly esteemed, they were cast out because they were like, how could you do this? Well, it's because they have something under the hood that they had to work out. And I won't dissect that story, although it is worthy of its own episode because it's really intriguing. But when we have things under the hood, we see these things, right? We see these acting out of karmic plays and stories. And so when we're not aware of it, then it can result in what appears to be egregious bad behavior. But I like to actually look at it from the lens of we're all on the journey together. And what happens when you break through to the supra consciousness is that you have to then come down off the mountain and integrate this with your everyday ordinary self. And what's beautiful about this experience is that it is a practice. It is an everyday practice. I myself practice every single day. So I'll give you an example. 2 days ago, my neighbor locked herself out, and I could hear it because I was about to leave, and so I was by my door, and she was calling her daughter and, trying to get somebody to get a key. And I popped my head out and I said, "Oh, did you lock yourself out?" And she said, "Yes." And I said, "I have a spare key." And she says, "Oh, okay." And I was like, "Here, let me give it to you." But I didn't just say, "I have a spare key." I said, "I just remembered," and then I corrected myself. I was trying to correct myself. I just remember, I realized, but even that wasn't correct, that I have a spare key. And I've been meaning to talk to you about it. I didn't say that. That's what I wanted to say. I've been meaning to give it to you. I didn't really mean that, but I said it. So I'm revealing to you my own practice of what's under the hood and controlling perceptions. So my neighbor locks herself out. I pop my head out and I'm like, "Hey, I just realized, I just remembered, I have a spare, I have a key for you. I have your key." What? What's going on? Why am I talking like this, right? Well, here's the backstory. I have been cognizant and aware that I've had a copy of her key, and I've been meaning to give it back to her, but I've been reluctant to do so because we share a important utility, and the access point for this utility is on her roof. And sometimes if that person is gone, then I need to be able to access it. Otherwise, I run out of things, like very important things. And so I have been edgy about communicating that I have a copy of this key because I haven't known her. I haven't known her travel schedule. I haven't, known anything, and it directly affects me and my little one. But at the same time, it doesn't feel good to hold on to a copy of somebody's key without telling them. And even though I have zero interest in invading her space, it doesn't feel right to me. It doesn't feel right. It doesn't feel like I'm in integrity to knowingly have this key and to not communicate it to her. And I'm holding myself accountable to a higher standard of integrity. This is my integrity work that I'm really focused on. And so when I heard that she locked herself out, I was like, this is the opportunity, because I haven't known how to broach this conversation with her. So I was like, this is the opportunity that I can come clean about this key. And so I intended on being truthful, and what came out was this instinctual controlling of a perception. Oh, I've had this key. I forgot that I had it. No, that's not true. Right? That's not true. And so what I needed to do is I needed to sit her down and say, "Hey, here's the backstory. Here's the why. And I have this key, and I'm happy to give it back to you or to work out an arrangement, but I need you to do X, Y, and Z if you go out of town. So, because it directly affects me." That's the right way to handle it, right? And instead, what I did is I clumsily was like trying to lie to her, right? And this, we're not talking about like a big lie, but it is kind of, it's gray. It's really gray. It's like, "Oh, I just remembered. Oh, I just realized." No, no, that's not true. Literally, that's not true. And so this is what it means to be a shadow journey work practitioner, where you are every day observing yourself and asking yourself, am I holding myself to the alignment, to the integrity, to the behavior patterns that I want to hold myself to? Because this is what happens. You go up to the mountain, you have this beautiful experience, you talk to God, you download so many things. you have these abilities come online, right? This is what we all experience. And they're unique. It's very like your abilities that emerge are different from mine. And it's fun, right? And then you have the sense of oneness and you have the sense of transcendence. And then you go to the grocery store and you go to the post office and you run this ordinary existence. And what happens is that your ordinary self, before you had that breakthrough moment, still exists inside of you. And everything under the hood still exists inside of you. And before that breakthrough, you had a set of behavior paradigms that you lived by, a code of ethics that you deemed to be okay, that you deemed to be justifiable. And what happens is, particularly in a compartmentalized society, is that we don't see all of our shadow aspects because we live in this curated image. It's like, I'm perfect. I'm a spiritual teacher. I know I'm having an affair, but, wow, like it's really important. It probably is. It actually probably is. That's what I want to tell the people that kicked him out. There's probably a reason that arrangement has played out the way that it has played out. And it's a powerful lesson for all parties involved, including the disciples, who I believe are fragmented in their consciousness about what it means to be pious and what it means to be a spiritual leader, right? So when we fabricate ourselves for the sake of pleasing others, or we do this with dating too, it's like we put our best foot forward, and most people do. And then in really deep pathological cases, what will happen is that one person will mold their identity to the other because they're not strong enough on their own, and they're so afraid of being rejected, and so they become this idealized version. They very quickly try to figure out what the other person likes and wants, and then they become that. And they become an illusion. They actually become an illusion. I've done this. I've seen other people do it. I've been with partners that have done it. And very often, if one person is doing it, then the other person's doing it too. That's the way it kind of works. But there are different degrees. And what happens is that people will hide the parts of their personality and their behaviors that they feel would result in rejection. In fact, I knew somebody, I was close to them, very powerful, very influential person. I won't say any more details, but they were incredibly, profoundly complex and gifted. And what happened is that they had a wife and anywhere from 2 to 3 girlfriends on the side. None of them knew about each other. But this person was so afraid of truly being seen and loved that they couldn't find a partner that they felt could actually see them, because they were afraid of actually being with that partner. So what they did is they compartmentalized themselves, fractured their personality, and divvied up their true self into, here's what the wife gets, here's what main steady girlfriend number 1 gets, here's what backup steady girlfriend number 2 gets, and then we have a third rotating one, more casual, who might work their way up, depending on how the studies go. Talk about controlling perceptions, right? But they did so because each person got a different piece of them. And if they were rejected by any one of those people, It didn't affect their core identity. It didn't affect their perception of being lovable. And so they were deathly afraid of finding somebody who was actually equal to them and who could see them for everything that they were. Anyway, so I am a reality shifting coach, and I specialize in working through shadow patterns and helping you break your patterns, particularly if you were caught in any sort of cycles of failed relationships or problems in love or else. If you are interested in booking a session with me or a weekly intensive, feel free to email me at sacredjourneyproductions@gmail.com. And by the way, my neighbor told me to hold on to the spare key after she unlocked herself. She, I think, intuitively knew that I wouldn't invade her space and that I was trustworthy and that it was a good idea for me to have a copy of her spare.